Supervisor Brandon, would you like to start?
Happy to. Longest time I haven't spoken. I just want to say I appreciate, again, everybody showing up. I know this isn't a convenient location for folks living in Columbia, not a convenient time, especially if you're picking up your kids. And your engagement in this is really meaningful. So thanks for doing that, even though it's a pain in the butt. Thanks to all the people that spoke. And thank you too for having, I think it was, as mentioned, very unique perspectives on what's happening. These were all different walks of life, different organizations, businesses, residents from school, all different folks. There's a few things that are very hard to, I think, ignore with this project. And let me say first, I want to thank our staff. You have put so much work into these projects. I mean, these grants, the reason we do grants is because we want to be respectful to local tax dollars while still trying to address issues. You put a ton of time into this. We've had citizen groups put a ton of time into this, an immense amount. This is not easy. It's very demanding. And I want to say I appreciate that. And I appreciate the board's commitment too to addressing homelessness. This is something that I think, while we may have our different approaches, we have shared something that we want to be able to work on. But what can't be ignored is I think was brought up by Jeff Whitman, and many others too, is that irrespective of necessarily the project, this is, while we follow the normal process, this is an example of why that normal process I don't think works very well. Because I think we should be having this as a county-wide discussion of how every community is stepping up to help in this, and that we should be trying to engage with the public first, even though that's a hard conversation. And this missed the ball. And I don't think it's anybody's fault except to say that that's just not how it works, and that needs to change so that we can do it that way. One of the questions whenever you have a site is also, say with an environmental impact document, what are the issues, how significant can they be mitigated? This, in some ways, had some of the questions that I had mitigated. So who's there? At first it was, could it be people with sexual violent histories? No. Then it's actually further specified to, I think, some of the lower risk populations, and I think that that's a significant improvement. But I don't think you can mitigate the distance to the school. And even with the people there, one thing in particular was the on-site services. That this wasn't simply a live-in center, this is a facility, I don't know, transactional facility where people would be going in, on and off. If even for the sensitivity of it, or the potential of that, that's something that we should be concerned about. Now that wasn't a rule or a guardrail anybody had set out. That may be an opportunity to look at this and say we should have some good neighbor policies. While we are looking for the most cost-effective investments, we should also say where we're probably not going to want that, even if it is the cheapest option, even if it is the fastest option. It's also, what I mentioned, the on-site services, that was something that I guess I wasn't aware of was being kind of proposed with all of this. I want to say that regardless, this is a challenging job because there are so many things going on with it. Depending on where this goes, I don't think it's ready, and I don't think it should go forward right now. I think there at minimum needs to be a lot more discussion with the public. I do think that there are better options, and I was open to maybe more entertaining in the spirit of us working together on it to see what it's been. And I talked to some people and they say, well, why are you arguing, against this project, the people that would like to see this? And then I go talk to the ones who are saying, well, they don't want this, and why are you arguing for it? That's just the way I think. I'm gonna first try to problem solve whatever it is. I'm not sure we can get there with this one. And so I'd encourage us to go back to the drawing board, and if the board decides to move forward, and this is the notice, it's the intent to sell, it does give us a 30-day comment period to hopefully after the fact have some of those conversations. I will do my best to organize that forum within Columbia. I would love to use the gym and be able to bring people out, to have also with our stakeholder meetings, if at least after the fact, and bring that back in. So if it moves forward, it will be at least doing its best to mitigate those concerns. But I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. I can't support this. I can't probably do better than our DA and our sheriff in echoing, we want to address this problem. This is an important issue. Not doing this doesn't fix the issue of homelessness, doesn't fix it in Columbia either. But the site concerns, the funding concerns, maybe wanting to see more of the plans for this, the other options, that's something that we gotta do. And so I can't move forward with it.
So I guess we are moving to comments then. I had asked for questions first, but
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought we were going to comments.
no, that's not what I said, but we're gonna move to comments now because you started it. So Supervisor Kirk, go ahead.
I want to hear from the other folks first. Anyway, I will say this, and this is why I want to hear from other folks first, is because I have not.
No, I want to hear from you.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. If you're going to want to hear from me, because I have not voted to make homelessness a priority for our budget, for our board, and I have not voted for homelessness to be a legislative priority moving forward. So since the majority of the board is taking up homelessness, I want to hear your opinions first as I formulate mine.
That's fair. Okay, Supervisor Campbell.
All right, well, thank you all for being here. Yeah, this is difficult because I feel, I'll just be kind of real with you, I feel pretty attacked. And I think members of the board feel really attacked when I can tell you, I didn't get into this because I wanted to, upset people or put children at risk. I have kids, and I do this because I think that I can make my community better for them. And I want to see them grow up in a safe place, a place where we care for each other, because I think there are really strong sentiments of that in Tuolumne County, stronger than other places in our state certainly, and I think anywhere in the world. I'll tell you a story, and this was not a long time ago. I was out getting pizza with my kids, and a gentleman came up and started striking up a conversation, and he just in the course of talking, he said that he was homeless and that he didn't have a blanket anymore, and he had lost it or someone had stolen it. And so I was talking to this gentleman for a little while, and we gathered up our things to go, and my daughter said, she said this to me, being the kid and I was the adult. Daddy, where are you going? He said he needed help. Why are we leaving? And so I realized that she was right. And so we went to the store, got him a blanket and some different things that we thought he might need, and went back and he was very grateful for that. And I don't know if he was telling the truth, but the point was it was somebody that said they were in need. I had no way of knowing whether or not that was true or not, and so, but it was somebody that asked for help, and so we helped them. And that was in Columbia. That was right downtown, right in the area that we're talking about where that happened. So the point of telling that story is that we're not talking about a problem that the county is planning on bringing into Columbia. We're talking about a problem that is already there, that needs to be solved, okay? And I've been here long enough to have sat in several discussions just like this, where a community is discussed, homelessness is discussed, and it goes one of two ways. One is, why isn't the county doing enough about homelessness? Look at these camps. Why aren't you doing something to stop this? And person after person, well-meaning people, just like you in our community, get up there and they demand that we find places for these people to live. They demand that we find housing, and that we harangue the state for all kinds of funding, because we know that we don't have enough of a tax base here in Tuolumne County to do it ourselves. We need help. And so we do that, and other counties do that. And finally, we get to a place where there is funding available from the state to do some of these things. And so we start casting about for a location. Every location that's been discussed over this time, and I know this might be the first time for many of you coming to a board of supervisors meeting, maybe some of you not, but it's not my first time, and I've seen lots of people coming to these meetings saying exactly what I heard tonight. And it's not to say that those concerns aren't valid, but that they're universal. Everyone will say that I believe in homelessness, I believe in the need to address homelessness, just not here. This just isn't the right spot. And if I say, if this is not the right spot, then where? And if this is not the right time, then when? There will never be a perfect location to help people. Now, who are we helping? We're helping the elderly. We're helping disabled people. We're helping foster youth and families. I don't hear anything in there about helping people that are likely to be threats to our children. And the fact is, and everybody knows this, there are people living in that very hotel on a long-term basis with no supervision already. We all know that. And so what is the difference between continuing on a similar basis with oversight and with investment in the community of millions of dollars? What is the difference between just continuing on doing what we have been doing, which is nothing, and actually trying to attack the problem? And I'm just not convinced that if we don't do something about this now, that it'll ever happen. And then we'll go right back to having more well-meaning people in our boardroom crying out to the board saying, why aren't you doing anything to solve this problem? There was one thing that was brought up a couple of times that I wrote down when the first person said it, because it was a great statement. He said, if one child is harmed by this, it's not worth it. Well, I ask you, what about the child? Hear that rain? What about the child that's out in that rain right now that might need a place to live? What's the harm to that child by not finding them a place to be safe and to be cared for? And the gentleman in the top hat that wanted to get a beer at the Jack Douglas Saloon, I guess he's gone. I want to take him up on that. I think there were some questions that were raised that were very legitimate. And don't think that I don't listen to every single comment here and take it to heart in every single email. I've tried to answer all of them. I don't think I have gotten to all of them in all the calls, but I do try. So I hope you'll forgive me if I'm not entirely successful. But the question was, how sure are you that about the ongoing funding for this? I think that's a really legitimate question. It's something that I consider myself the cheapskate on the board. I don't like to spend a lot more money than we have to, and I worry about future funding. So we need to really look at that, and we need to engage the community on this. Transportation, I think we do need to secure that. You know, I sit on the board for a transit agency along with Supervisor Half, and I'm very confident that we can work a solution to that problem. So I hope all of this is to tell you that I don't want to put anyone's children at risk. I don't want to put any community at risk. And I'm kind of desperate at this point. There are no other locations that we have looked at that are viable for this. In fact, it's pretty rare that anything of this nature comes up for sale. But we're not talking about a homeless camp. We're talking about a transitional housing unit. And I know it sounds like I'm being a government bureaucrat putting a technical word on something, but it truly is something different. And I don't see it, it's not the vision of hobos standing around a burn barrel warming their hands by the firelight, you know. That is not what I want to see in our community. And I want to continue to go to the Charlie and have pickled pizzas, so it's in my best interest to not harm this community. So I hope you believe that, and I hope you understand my heart. And I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I know we have 5 people on this board that all care about the community and all want to see what's best. So I know it has its problems, and I know that there are issues, but I support proceeding. I think that on an economic basis, the cost of this facility, I think, is reasonable, and I think we have the money to pay for it. And I think on a fiduciary level, which is really the root question, I know there's a much larger philosophical question at hand here, but the root question is, can we afford it, and is it a reasonable purchase of the property, and I think that it is.
Thank you. All right, I took copious notes. I have over 2 pages. I listened to every single word that was spoken here and took really good notes. And I do have to apologize, like Supervisor Campbell, I've got, I don't know how many scores, probably close to 100 emails that it was just an onslaught, so I did not have a chance to answer most of those. So I apologize for that, but we're here now, and I do have some comments that I'd like to bring to the forefront. And I'm going to start with this so that I hope that you listen to what else I have to say, okay? The first thing I'm going to say is I don't see how we can move forward with this. However, this is the part I want you to listen to. There is a disconnect here. We're not communicating apples to apples. Somebody, I think it was a sheriff actually, who said he agrees that he knows that this, if it were to come to pass, this particular place would be properly managed. I don't think most people in this room understand what case management is all about. So with that, I want to ask for a show of hands, how many, okay, I'm just going to ask a rhetorical question, no show of hands. The rhetorical question is, how many supportive service shelters are there currently in Tuolumne County? And I'm imagining that most people don't know. You've heard about a couple of them that the county manages, but I'm talking about overall. How many are there? Because we don't manage them all. APCA has an emergency shelter. CVNC has an emergency shelter. There are a couple that you heard about from behavioral health, and numerous nonprofit organizations that run case-managed shelters of some shape or form. And if you count the emergency children's shelter, there are 9. There are 9 already in this county. And what do you hear about them? Do you hear police calls going to them all the time? Do you even know where they are? Chances are you don't. That's what a properly managed shelter is all about. Okay? Now, the location, I hear you, okay? But we need to start this education process somewhere, and this is the first step. That we will be working out the logistics. There has been a difference of opinion actually from the presentation we got on the navigation center and what I understand to be a navigation center. A navigation center, from my research and going to other jurisdictions and where they have navigation centers, is you do not walk in. You do not show up at a navigation center. You have to be referred. And that's almost across the board. So I would hope that our staff would revisit that and look at that, because there's no reason to bring others to just show up at the door. Case management is where this is at. And when people just show up, that doesn't work. So the difference I'm seeing here is perspective. And I think Supervisor Campbell said it when he talked about the types of folks that would be referred and vetted. They're not the people you're seeing on the streets doing the drugs with the needle sticking out their arm. They're the elderly. In fact, we had a couple of elderly women come to our board meeting. When was that? Last year. One was a nurse and living out of her car. There are all sorts of examples. People that have jobs, but they don't have a home, and they can't get the medical services without a place to live and get started and redo their life. So the disabled, how are they going to be offending children? I don't get that. Or anybody else in their neighborhood. I'm going to take it out of the school setting. And foster youth, who have been kicked out of foster homes, they probably need the most case management, I would think. And then families, if we're not going to help the families and the children of those families, who are we going to help as a society? So we've got to come to some reckoning here and eventually land upon a place that will work. But everybody needs to be on the same page as to what this will entail. Okay, I think that's enough. I've got all sorts of notes here, I could go on, but those are my main points. And so now, Supervisor Kirk?
All right, a couple questions and then some comments, but one thing that did kind of catch me off guard a little bit was the navigation piece, because my understanding is that potentially people who are going to be housed here, that navigation was going to be serving them. But it sounds like the navigation center will be serving, obviously, other referrals. So, can you just give me a rundown? What would that look like, bringing people in and out? Because I am concerned about who knows who's going to be there at the navigation site.
Supervisor Kirk, thank you for asking that question. As I said at the beginning of my presentation, I said this is a draft proposal with a capital D, and it was loud and clear that the community did not appreciate an open navigation center, so that has to be on the table.
Okay. So we could potentially not make this a navigation center, but basically serve the people that are at that site. Okay.
It can still be called a navigation center.
Yeah,
The idea
that was
of,
what I was.
like you hit it on the head, it would not be that. So that's, thank you for clarifying that. I'm gonna try to unpack this. As far as funding goes, I've always voted against the general fund ever being touched. I will today, I will tomorrow. If the state keeps putting money out for homelessness and this board continues to make that a priority, then that's where the money's gonna come from, the state, not the general fund. So, so let me try and unpack this real quick. And this is not pointing the finger at the board. This is just a reality that what happens when you get elected to government office. And the first thing I'm gonna say, I'm just gonna try and check these off the list, and then we're gonna go somewhere. Some people brought up, since Obama's era, housing first, all these ideas for homelessness, and we're all very aware that the homeless issue has exploded in California. So obviously what we've been doing hasn't been working, but when we unpack homelessness, we generally paint very broad brushes. I'm not going to go into my theology, but long story short, I think if you want to fix homelessness, you got to have a 40-year plan. You got to fix the family, you got to bring the dad back, you got to stop pumping drugs out into the community, right? Stop with the cannabis thing, stop with the gummies, stop with the hallucinants, stop with all that baloney. It's got to be a much bigger, broader approach, but that's not where the state is, that's not where the legislators are. We're just, let's fix money to make it look like we're doing something. What I'm hearing today is not to go after the random drug addict who we all fear and don't want near our kids. I'm hearing something very specific and very vetted, which we're going to get into in a minute. I will also say, and this is where, again, I don't want to point the finger at the board, I just want the community to know I have not voted for the homeless issue to be a priority for the board, and I have not voted to make homelessness be a legislative action for the board. However, I do sit on a board where the majority has voted to do that. So I have two options. I can vote no on everything and have zero effect on the outcome, or I can be a part of the process, understand the card is dealt to me, and I can try and mitigate and help our board go in the right direction. You guys understand? You guys feel me? That's the seat I'm in. I'm just being real with you. So I can sit here and be popular and vote no, and maybe that's going to make me feel good and make everybody think I'm great, but that's not how I can affect change here today. So I would agree that this looked horrible as far as optics go when we were talking about, but it was kind of discussed earlier, when you're negotiating property, how do you have a community conversation? How do you loop in the community? You can't, because it's negotiations where you have to protect the seller and the buyer's rights. As soon as the negotiation was final, we're having this meeting. Again, it doesn't look good, and I totally get it. I want to speak to the fact, being a father of 3, and my wife is pregnant. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell people that, but we're going to have a 4th. And yeah, thanks. Found out on Valentine's Day. So the reason why I ran to be a supervisor was because of my kids and their future. My wife was in education, and I'm going to tell you a quick story, which was I ran this scenario by somebody who I trust who is also in education, and I told them where this was going to be placed, and they said, horrible idea, next to children. You're also going to influence the education system. You're going to influence or increase the IAPs for kids who have special needs, like things I never even thought of. I will also say there was a shooting in a school like a decade ago. I forget the name of it, but I was at work. And when I saw it, I made a promise in my heart after that shooting that I was eventually going to find a way to keep my kids home and homeschool because of the fear I have with the public school system. I'm just sharing something personal with you. So, so I get the concerns. I will also say that 2 weeks ago, my wife sent me a text message of a homeless person walking by my house. And it wasn't the homeless person walking by my house that upset me, it was my kid's reaction. Because my son, who was outside playing in the trees, ran in the house, got the dog. He's got a little BB gun, armed himself with a BB gun. And that was more upsetting than anything. So the parents who were saying, when my kids go to school and they're gonna see these homeless people and they're gonna be afraid, I hear what you are saying, okay? Which is gonna lead me into this, and which is gonna lead me in why I wanted the sheriff to stick around. So, I asked earlier about how we're going to vet folks, and if we're not just necessarily talking today about purchasing the property, but we are kind of having a program discussion. The program discussion has already eliminated the navigation center specifically for people abroad, but keeping it specific for the potential people who may be there if we move forward with this. So, what I would like to see if my contingencies on this moving forward, and let me back up a little bit. Back to my point where our board has made it a priority to address homelessness. And we are going through this process. We're going to go through this process day after day, after year, after year, after month, and we will get the same result that Supervisor Campbell said, which is not in my backyard. And everybody wants to address it, and I look at it from a biblical point of view, I look at it from a widow's point of view, from a child's point of view, and I will simply say that what I want to hone in on specifically, because I think if you took this property and the school was far away and the park was a little far away, I'm not as concerned about the park, but it's really children's safety. I think a lot more people would be supportive of this idea. It comes down to the safety, right? Again, I'm trying to look at it through the lens of trying to mitigate this. So here's what I would like to see, and this is where you will get a vote from me to support this. I would like to see this be a step-up program, not a program where people are placed and then transition. There needs to be a phase, and I don't know if it's through one of those 9 housing units that are already in place, but this needs to be a place, because when I ask questions about offline, I asked about another location where we do have success stories. I have success stories in front of me of folks who have transitioned through programs, 82 individuals, 7 families, 2 pregnant women, have gotten within 5 months have been placed in permanent housing. So I know there is some metrics I haven't really been sharing, but there is some success. But in part of that response, I was told that during the first few weeks, some were weeded out. So what I don't want is I don't want people to be housed here and then in the first few weeks, some are weeded out. What I want is for people to be weeded out before they land there. So that would be my first thing, is this isn't the first initial spot. This is they've kind of like a step-up program. They've gone from one of these other spots, they've been vetted, they have now, they're gonna abide by the rules, they can be placed in this location. And this is specifically because of the school and because of the children, so that's one. The second thing is, again, this is all encompassing children in that school. They can't be current drug users. And I would recommend that we, and I would require that we do drug testing. So they can't be current addicts, and they need to be drug tested. The second thing I would require, or the third thing, is that Penal Code 667.5 deals with violent history, and Penal Code 1192.7C deals with non-serious history. So if they're gonna land in that spot, they can't have a violent or serious history attached with them. Somebody brought up the fact that you can be serious or violent and then get it reduced to misdemeanor. Sure you can, but it still shows on the rap sheet. So I don't know how we would go through that as far as, because there's gotta be a CLETS printout, I don't know who's gonna review, I don't know what kind of case manager's gonna have the ability to vet that, but I don't know if that includes the sheriff's department. But again, I'm just gonna make it clear, a step-up program, can't be current addicts because I don't want to have people who have altered mindsets, drug tested, no violent history, no serious history, and again, we're talking about elderly, disabled families going through the Child Welfare Navigation Center. I think that, I can't assume, because I know everybody here is against the location, but if I can eliminate, as a parent, if I could send my child to Columbia Elementary and know that those people were in the right state of mind, that they can program, that they're not serious, they're not violent, and that they're disabled, their families, their kids going through the system with their mothers and families, I think, I would hope that the majority of the community could get behind that. So, for me, that would eliminate the safety thing. You know, Ryan kind of hit it on the head as far as if somebody does hurt one kid, I will tell you, the human element isn't possible to predict. I work in the field where that's what I do for a living, and it sucks trying to predict human behavior, but I think if we can implement these things, we can mitigate that from potentially ever happening. And I would be able to go to bed at night if I knew those things were in place, and I would be able to have that housed next to my kids if they were going to school at that spot. So that's where I land.
All right, before we go to a motion for a vote, I want to ask you, where do we, in order to satisfy Supervisor Kirk's conditions, and I don't know where the rest of the board stands on that, but do we have a place where they can go first and become, you know, it's more than vetted. They live there for a while, and when they've proven themselves, it's a step up. So do we currently have any place like that?
The only locations we have right now are hotels. The hotel would be first, and then what I'm hearing Supervisor Kirk is then the Columbia Inn, the Navigation Center would be two after you've proved yourself at the first location, which would be
Which would be the
a
what?
hotel.
A hotel. Oh, for not permanent stay. Yes. And are the hotels case managed?
Yes.
Okay.
And I do have a question, Sheriff Pooley, that's why I asked you. We run a CLETS, no serious, no violent, they've been vetted.
I'm seeing the
Is your
situation in my
department-
head.
As a law enforcement for the Tuolumne County, do you feel like that's a safer proposal? Well, it's obviously safer, is it something that you can get behind?
Thank you, Supervisor. I just want to make sure I'm hearing your question correctly. Can we give out background information? No, we cannot, but we can have somebody sit on the board or the committee and then say yes or no without giving any criteria, if that makes sense.
Sure, and do you feel, as the number one concern from the community that you brought up was the safety of the children. Screening them out through that type of criteria, does that make you as a law enforcement officer feel better about that location? And we screened out the Navigation Center.
Better, yes. 100% no. I think that with, as you alluded to earlier, with the passage of hallucinogens, we've done the same thing. We had a gentleman the other day that held somebody hostage. It's a misdemeanor. So as long as we're allowed to say yes or no, I feel pretty good about it. But if you're gonna say non-violent, very specific crimes, a lot of them over the past several years,
Okay, let's just make it simple. You say yes or no, and then that's the end of it.
I feel pretty good about that.
Okay.
All right. Are there other comments from staff?
I appreciate the conversation about trying to find our way there. I would be concerned about a couple of those steps that you had and whether or not they can be in compliance with Housing First.
So the funding has certain requirements, and we know that it's low barrier. I think that the thing that's complex here is you will have the funding, and then you will also have people that HHSA serves. So for instance, we're talking about parents who are in a dependency case. They will already have had Let's Run because that's part of the process, right? So while the funding for the this placement may not allow that type of background check, a service that is court ordered because somebody is reunifying their children, it would be allowed in that context. The one thing I think we have to be clear is that we probably cannot do just blanket background checks. We absolutely can check for sex offender, and there are certain types of records, criminal records that are that we can look for. We can look and search court records. That's a public record, we can search those. But in terms of asking the sheriff's office or district attorney's office to run Let's on everybody, that's not something that we're gonna be able to legally do. But again, it doesn't mean that we won't have some of that information depending on the type of services that they're in. So,
Well, if the state wants to house people, then they need to hear people's concerns. This is next to a school, so I don't know what else to, either we make it safe or we don't.
Sheriff Tuolumne.
So I went back to the back of the room, had a little discussion, and talked about a lot of things that Sarah just brought up. And I'm gonna bring Dave Vasquez up. He is in charge of professional standards, and he knows all policies that go along with being able to run folks. And the simple fact, a lot of folks nowadays, what would traditionally have been a sex-related crime no longer is. And I think that that's what we're gonna run into some problems.
No pressure to come up here and cite policy about what records are going to be available or not. I will say blanketly, thank you for county counsel. She's absolutely correct because I kind of cringed a little bit when I was thinking where this is going. I'm the DOJ liaison for our office, so I know that there's specific criteria on right to know, need to know information, and when we can run individuals through CLETS or CORE information, which is criminal offender records. This would not be one of those situations where we would do that. And I would also remind the board and support staff that those records are only as good as people who are following the rules and procedures to register as a sex offender or as any other type of offender, whether it's the warrant process, but there's several processes in place that require adherence to the law, and we know enough to know that not everybody is going to adhere to the law. So I would just offer that information as a factor into the vetting process that Supervisor Kurth is talking about. Thank you.
So, having said that, eloquently, I've changed my position, sir.
It's funny because working in a prison, we put people outside our gate to fight fires, and they're heroes for the community. And you would not believe the type of inmate that we're putting outside the gate, but there's a process and there's a procedure to follow that mitigates that. So it's frustrating that if you're saying that the Housing First model wouldn't allow such a process to take place, and it's again another reason why the Housing First model is set to fail. I'll go to round two, and then I'll leave it at that. What about, do we have enough clientele to serve women and children to support that type of unit, or is it so minimal?
Are you saying only?
Yeah.
The
Like
clients,
family, women and children and families.
the clients that we're serving right now only meet that criteria. So the clients right now that are in hotels are elderly, disabled, transitional age youth and families. That's all we have funding for right now.
Right now, I guess my question is, do we have enough space to just only serve women and children?
Yes. We have enough clients.
Okay,
Fill that.
with the model, the legal review, can we just approve to only put women and children in there?
I believe we can do that.
Alright, since I don't have the sheriff's support for my first option, I would recommend is women and children. And again, this sucks because, you know, what's gonna happen if when we go to do other models, that if the board wants to, you know, put houses in communities, the neighbors are gonna show up and they're gonna have little children playing in the swing set, and we're not gonna be able to screen them to see if they're violent or serious offenders, right? So this whole thing's set up to just suck.
Supervisor Kirk, I just want to be clear here because I think that there's two different things we're looking at. We've got the funding requirements, and then you've got people that HHSA serves. And when they serve those individuals, so if they're in a dependency case, they're reunifying their children, most likely they have, well, not most likely, they have a court-ordered case plan. And it includes things like drug testing, like AA meetings, like group therapy, parenting classes, etc. So if that's those individuals, and also you will have a classroom on those individuals.
Okay.
You will have that information.
I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that.
And I could add something kind of based off of what Rebecca, Mrs. Spina had said, that we could eliminate all of these restrictions and say it's 100% open to everyone regardless of their criminal background, and still have enough people that are already in the system where that facility would only be filled with women and children. So even without the restrictions, if we were just going down to the list based on need that already exists in our community, there would only be women and children in that facility.
Okay. So,
I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
So I'm just being real. It sounds like I'm the swing vote. So my idea is I'm going to look to the community. If you guys had women and children being housed in that, would you support it? Women and children. Hands up. No support for women and children.
I'll give you 5 acres at the bottom of my driveway. It's in your district. You can build the center right there, 5 acres at the bottom of the driveway.
Women and children. Okay. All right. Interesting.
All right, I'm gonna, excuse me, we're not having a back and forth with the public right now.
No, I didn't. I asked. Thank you for your opinions.
So I would like to bring this to a close, and I would entertain a motion.
So my motion would be only for women and children at this facility, at this site.
And do I hear a second?
And the vetting, of course, all that vetting.
And I'd be happy to second that, because I think if we can help some people, that's better than helping nobody.
So I heard a motion by Supervisor Kirk and a second by Supervisor Campbell. And this is for authorizing staff to post a notice of intent to purchase the property. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No.
No. Any abstentions? I think I heard 2-2. So we don't have 5 members of the board. Sarah?
So there is no action because you need
A
one
majority.
more. And so our recommendation is that we would bring this back to your board when we do have all 5 members in order to get Supervisor Goldenberg's input on it.
Okay, so that's where we sit right now.
If I can add one thing to that.
Sure.
Just with Supervisor Kirk's ideas, this is not gonna be a good back and forth with that. In between now and that item, I will take those ideas, and if it moves forward, in concept, I agree, I think that's a lower risk population, and additional vetting with it. I will meaningfully talk to, and I invite everybody, please talk to me about that. And if that is something that changes it, if that is something that is an acceptable change, please let me know, and then we can come back and reevaluate. But I will be having a lot of conversations about that.
And may I add one more thing? I just wanted to say, I get to know, a lot of people brought up the Dollar General thing. I was involved in that, and I was with you 100% on that. That's where I get to know some folks from Columbia, and I think that almost did a good thing for Columbia because it got everybody together and organized. But what I'm gonna ask folks today is, don't let this be the end of it. Please try and channel some of the energy that you have and the concern that you have for your community into coming up with solutions for what we can do, and not necessarily just what we shouldn't do. And I realize that's a much more difficult thing to do, but we need your help. So thank you for everybody that's here today.
And Rebecca, I think you had some parting thoughts. Excuse me, hold on just a minute. Mrs. Spina, you had some parting thoughts.
Supervisor Kirk, I just want clarification. You said women and children. How about the children's dads? I just want to make sure that
they are properly vetted,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
so, Michael Roberson.
Some weeks ago, your board authorized some of us to go negotiate with the sellers. I am concerned about us making plans to sort of vet a whole new taking time to vet a whole new program model when I don't know if they're interested in continuing negotiations. So I would like the freedom to be able to confirm that with them before we make any plans to come back before the board or reshape this program model or any of those kinds of things, because it just would be a waste of time.
That's reasonable. Thank you. All right, thank you for all who have participated today in this long meeting, and for those of you who have stuck it out to the very end, thank you very much.